William Thompson gazed out at New York from the window of his 40th floor office. At 45, he was the epitome of American corporate success. CEO of one of the country's largest tech companies, a sought-after speaker, and a frequent face in business magazines. His custom Italian suit and Swiss wristwatch were just details in the meticulous construction of his image. "Mr. Thompson, the board meeting will begin in 5 minutes, announced Emily, his assistant of over a decade, through the intercom. "Thank you, Emily, I'm on my way," he replied automatically, adjusting his silk tie in the reflection of the window. The grey July sky seemed to mirror the emptiness he had been feeling lately. Despite all the impressive numbers in his bank account, something was missing. It was a nagging feeling he tried to ignore by burying himself deeper in his work. In the boardroom, the black leather chairs were already filled by the board members. William led the presentation with the precision of a conductor, detailing the latest quarterly results and future projections. This was his natural habitat, where every word and gesture was calculated to maximize impact. "And with that, we project a 35% growth for the next fiscal year," he concluded, observing the satisfied smiles around the table. After the meeting, it was already past 9 in the evening when William finally left the office. His driver was waiting in the garage, as usual. In the back seat of the armored sedan, he loosened his tie and closed his eyes for a moment. "Would you like to stop anywhere before heading home, sir?" asked Michael, his driver of many years. "No, Michael, straight home, please," he replied, feeling a fatigue that went beyond physical exhaustion. In his penthouse apartment in the Upper East Side, William poured himself a whiskey and walked out to the balcony. The city pulsed below, millions of lights dotting the darkness. His phone vibrated. It was a message from his ex-wife, Laura. "William, Ethan asked if you'll be able to make it to his school presentation tomorrow." Ethan, his 12-year-old son. The presentation he had completely forgotten. "Sorry, Laura, I have an important meeting tomorrow. I can't make it." The reply came quickly. "He's going to be disappointed. It's the 3rd time this year." William took a long sip of whiskey, feeling the liquid burn his throat. His ex-wife's words hit him like a punch to the gut. It was true, he was failing as a father, just as he had failed as a husband. His thoughts were interrupted by a sharp pain in his chest. At first he tried to ignore it, but the pain quickly intensified. The glass slipped from his hand, shattering on the balcony floor. The last thing William saw was the night sky of New York spinning above his head as he fell. Somewhere between consciousness and unconsciousness, William felt as if he were floating. The city lights seemed distant now, as if he were observing them through a veil. An inexplicable peace enveloped him, unlike anything he had ever experienced. "William," a familiar voice called out. A voice he hadn't heard in over 20 years. When he opened his eyes, he was no longer in his penthouse. He found himself in a place that seemed made of light and mist, and before him stood his father, exactly as he remembered. Grey hair, gentle smile, eyes that seemed to hold all the secrets of the universe. "Dad?" he whispered, unable to believe what he was seeing. "Yes, son. We need to talk." His father's words echoed in the ethereal space, marking the beginning of a journey that would forever change the life of William Thompson. The environment around William seemed to pulse with its own energy. The mist surrounding them occasionally formed fleeting images, reminiscences of moments from his life that appeared and vanished like soap bubbles. "Where are we?" asked William, his voice sounding different in that ethereal space. "In a place between places," replied his father, Robert, "a space where time doesn't follow the rules, you know." William looked at his father's hands, the same calloused hands he remembered from his childhood, when Robert still worked as a carpenter in his small workshop in Colorado. Before success, before money, before everything William now considered important. "Am I dead?" "No, son. But you are at a crucial moment. You are being given an opportunity that few receive." The mist around them began to shift, taking on more defined shapes. William found himself observing a scene from his childhood, himself at 8 years old in his father's workshop, trying to learn how to sand a piece of wood. "Do you remember that day?" asked Robert. "How could I forget? That was when you taught me that patience was more important than strength." William smiled at the memory. I was frustrated because I couldn't get the wood as smooth as you could. And what else did I teach you that day? The question made William furrow his brow. You said that every piece of wood had its own story, its own knots and grains, and that we needed to respect that. And what happened to those lessons, son? The question struck William like a bolt of lightning. In his pursuit of success, he had completely forgotten those simple yet profound teachings. Patience had given way to haste, and respect for individuality had been replaced by a relentless quest for results. The scene shifted again, and now they observed a more recent moment. William in his office, yelling at a young employee who had made a mistake in a presentation. You've become the kind of man you yourself feared as a child, Robert said softly. The words hurt more than the heart attack that had brought him there. William felt tears forming in his eyes, something that hadn't happened in years. Dad, I don't know when I lost my way. No one ever completely loses their way, son. Sometimes we just need a new perspective to see the right direction. Again. The fog began to thicken once more, taking on different shapes. William saw faces, dozens, hundreds of them. Employees he had fired without a second thought, business partners he had betrayed in the name of profit, his ex-wife crying alone while he worked late, his son waiting for him on countless occasions, when he never showed up. Every decision we make creates ripples, explained Robert, like rings in the water when we throw a stone. Have you ever stopped to observe the rings your decisions have created in the lives of others? The fog around, them transformed into an endless corridor, with doors on both sides. Each door, William soon discovered, led to a moment in his life. Not just significant moments, but also small decisions, words spoken without thought, gestures of indifference. Why are you showing me all this? Asked William, his voice trembling. Slightly. Because you need to understand, replied his father. It's not just about success or failure, wealth or poverty. It's about the impact we have on the world. They stopped in front of a particular door. Upon opening it, William found himself in a scene from 5 years ago. It was the day he had decided to shut down one of the company's factories, laying off hundreds of employees to increase profit margins. Look closer, instructed Robert. The scene expanded and William could see beyond the spreadsheets and numbers he had used to justify his decision. He saw the affected families, the interrupted dreams, the drastically altered lives. He saw Sarah, the employee who had worked at the company for 20 years and had to sell her home. He saw Ethan, the technician who couldn't find another job and fell into depression. Every number in your spreadsheets was a life, William, a full story with hopes, fears, and dreams. William felt the weight of these revelations as if they were physical. I was just doing my job, following the rules of the market. The rules of the market, Robert repeated thoughtfully. And who makes those rules, son? Who decides that profit is worth more than human dignity? Before William could respond, the scene changed again. Now they were in a hospital, observing an elderly woman in a bed. It was Mrs. Margaret, William's former secretary, who had requested early retirement due to health issues. Do you remember what you said to her? William closed his eyes. Shame, burning in his chest. I told her she was being weak, that she was letting the company down. And did you know she was battling cancer? No, I never asked. I never cared to know. The pain on William's face was evident now. Each new revelation was like a layer being peeled away, exposing the raw truth of his actions. But Dad, he said after a moment, I also did good things. I created jobs, generated wealth. Yes, son. No one is entirely good or entirely bad, but that's not the point. The point is, what kind of legacy do you want to leave? What kind of waves do you want to create in the ocean of life? The mist around them began to glow with a different intensity. William felt a presence, something beyond his father, an energy that seemed to permeate the entire environment. What is that? He asked, his voice barely above a whisper. It's time for you to meet someone, Robert replied, and his figure began to dissolve into the growing light. Dad, don't go! William tried to reach him, but his hands passed through the increasingly translucent image of Robert. Do not be afraid, my son. Sometimes we need to face certain truths alone. The light intensified until William had to close his eyes. When he reopened them, He found himself in a garden that defied logic, flowers of impossible colors, trees that seemed to touch an endless sky, and a peace that permeated every fiber of his being. "Welcome, William," said a voice that seemed to come from all directions at once. Before him materialized a figure that constantly shifted. Sometimes it appeared as an elderly woman with kind eyes, other times as a mischievous child with a playful smile, and at times merely a pulsating light with a vaguely human shape. "Hoaka, what are you?" "I am what you need me to be in this moment," the figure replied. "Some call me universal consciousness, others divine love. The names matter less than what they represent." The figure approached, and William felt a wave of unconditional love that made him stagger. It was a love unlike anything I had ever experienced, pure without judgment or expectations. "Why am I here?" he asked, his voice choked with emotion. "Because you are ready to see," replied the UI figure, extending what appeared to be a hand. "Come." With a gentle touch, the garden vanished, and they found themselves floating above New York. But the city William knew was different. He could see lines of light connecting people, like a gigantic web of energy and relationships. "What are these connections?" "They are the bonds that unite all lives," the figure explained. "Every thought, every action, every choice creates or strengthens these connections, or weakens them." William watched in awe as some lines shone brightly, while others seemed faint and frayed. "Look," said the figure, drawing them closer to a specific building, the headquarters of his company. There, William could see how his decisions had affected the web of connections. Where there should have been strong lines of cooperation and mutual support, there were only broken and darkened fragments. "But there is also light," the figure pointed out, showing some spots where the glow was more intense. These were places where, even without realizing it, William had done something positive. A moment of kindness with an employee, a decision that had benefited an entire community. "I never imagined that each action could have such an impact," murmured William. "Everything is connected," replied the figure. "There are no isolated actions in the fabric of the universe." The scene changed again, and now they observed specific moments from William's life, but from a completely new perspective. He saw how his obsessive behavior for success had created waves of fear and anxiety that spread throughout the company. He also saw how small gestures of kindness, which he barely remembered, had generated positive effects that continued to reverberate. "What do you see now, William?" I see that I was blind," he replied, feeling tears stream down his face. "I thought success was about numbers, about results, but it's about people, about connections, about love," the figure gently completed. "How can I fix all of this?" asked William, his voice filled with regret and hope. "That's the right question," the figure replied, smiling, "and that's why you're here." The figure led William through a portal of light, and they found themselves in a space that seemed to be made of memories, not just his own, but of all the people his life had touched. "What do you see when you look at your life, William?" asked the figure, who now appeared as a wise elder. William gazed at the kaleidoscope of memories floating around him. "I see missed opportunities. Moments when I could have made a difference, but I chose the easier path." "And what do you see when you look into the future?" The question made William pause. For the first time he realized he was seeing beyond memories. There were also glimpses of possibilities, untrodden paths, unrealized potentials. "I see hope," he replied, surprised by his own answer. The figure smiled, and the space around them transformed once again. Now they were in a kind of amphitheater, where scenes from William's life were projected simultaneously, like a multidimensional film. "Observe," instructed the figure. William saw himself at different moments in his life, but now he could clearly perceive the points of choice, moments when a different decision could have changed everything. He saw the idealistic young man he was in college, full of dreams of making a difference in the world. He saw the exact moment he began trading his ideals for ambition. Each of these moments was a choice between love and fear, the figure explained, between connection and isolation. "But I didn't know." I didn't understand." "Now you understand," the figure replied kindly. "And that's what matters." The scenes continued to unfold, showing not only the past but also possible futures. William saw versions of himself where he had chosen different paths, versions where he had prioritized relationships over profits, compassion over competition. "How can I become that person?" he asked, pointing to a particularly radiant version of himself. "You are already becoming," the figure replied. "Change begins the moment we decide to change." The figure then led William to a specific part of the amphitheater where a particular scene was unfolding. It was his son, Ethan, alone in his room, looking at a photo of them together. "What do you feel when you see this?" "Pain," William replied immediately, "and shame. I should have been there for him." "And what do you want to do about it?" I want to be the father he deserves. I want to be the man I should have been." At that moment, a golden light began to pulse around them, and the figure smiled with even more kindness. "Are you ready for the next step?" "What is it?" asked William, feeling a mix of apprehension and hope. "To see what could be." The light enveloped William completely, and when it dissipated, he found himself in a possible future. It was his company, but completely transformed. The once cold and impersonal offices now had green areas, communal spaces, and a daycare for employees' children. "Is this possible?" he asked, amazed by the transformation. "It's one of the possibilities," the figure replied. "Look closer." William found himself walking through the halls of this transformed version of his company. Employees didn't avert their gaze in fear. Instead, they smiled and greeted him with genuine warmth. On the walls, there were pictures showcasing social and environmental projects carried out by the company. "How did this happen?" he asked, absorbing every detail. "Through daily choices," the figure answered. "Small decisions that, when added up, created a bigger change." The scene shifted, and now William was observing a board meeting. His future self was presenting not just financial results, but also social and environmental impacts. "But the shareholders," he began, "they discovered that companies guided by purpose and compassion can also be profitable," the figure completed. "Sometimes even more so." Other scenes followed: training programs for young people from underprivileged communities, environmental recovery projects, partnerships with NGOs. The company had become a catalyst for social transformation. "And your family?" the figure asked gently. The scene changed once more, and William found himself in a future moment with Ethan, his son. They were at a company social project, working together, laughing together. The wall of silence and resentment between them had disappeared. "Is it possible to rebuild?" asked William, his voice choked with emotion. "True love always offers a second chance," replied the figure. "But it requires courage, persistence, and above all, action." The light began to pulse differently, and William felt a gentle yet firm force pulling him. "What's happening?" he asked, feeling a slight panic. "It's time to go back," replied the figure. "Your body is calling." "But I still have so many questions." "The answers will come through your actions," said the figure, beginning to dissolve into the light. "Remember, love is not just a feeling, it's a choice we make every moment." William felt himself being pulled back through a tunnel of light. At times he heard distant voices, doctors and nurses fighting to save him. "One last gift," said the voice of the figure, now distant, "to help you remember." A series of images flashed quickly through his mind. People who would need his help, opportunities to make a difference, crucial moments yet to come. They weren't exact predictions, but possibilities, seeds of change planted in his consciousness. Then, with a start and a deep breath, William opened his eyes. He was in a hospital bed, tubes and monitors surrounding him. A young nurse noticed. He had woken up and quickly called the doctor. "Welcome back, Mr. Thompson," said the doctor, checking his vitals. "You gave us quite a scare." "He had a severe heart attack, but we managed to stabilize him in time." William tried to speak, but his throat was dry from the tube that had been removed. "Don't strain yourself," said the nurse, offering him a glass of water. "Your family is in the waiting room. Would you like me to call them?" Family. The word carried a different weight now. William nodded, feeling tears in his eyes. Moments later, Ethan rushed into the room, followed by Laura, who was trying to calm him down. "Dad!" exclaimed Ethan, stopping by the bed, unsure of how to act. William reached out, touching his son's face. "Forgive me," he whispered, his voice hoarse, "for everything." The weeks following his discharge from the hospital were a period of deep reflection for William. In his penthouse on the Upper East Side, now quiet and contemplative, he spent hours reminiscing about every detail of his experience in the spiritual realm. "Are you sure about this decision?" asked Emily, his assistant, when he shared his plans for transforming the company. They were in his home office, where William was still recovering. "I've never been more certain of anything in my life, Emily," he replied, gazing out the window. The city seemed different now. He could feel the energy of the connections he had glimpsed during his experience. The first major test came during the board meeting, held via video conference due to his convalescence. William presented his vision for transforming the company, implementing social programs, changing human resources policies, and investing in sustainability. "This is madness," exclaimed one of the board members. "Our shareholders won't accept this reduction in profit margins." "I'm not proposing to reduce profits," William replied calmly. "I'm proposing to redefine what success means." To the surprise of many, his conviction was contagious. Gradually, even the most skeptical members of the board began to see the potential of a purpose-driven company. At home, reconnecting with Ethan was a delicate process. Years of absence couldn't be erased overnight. "Do you want to play video games with me?" William asked one afternoon when Ethan came to visit. The boy looked at him suspiciously. "You never wanted to play before." "I know," William replied, feeling the weight of every missed opportunity. "But I want to start now." That afternoon of gaming was the beginning of a new relationship. Between departures and laughter, father and son began to build bridges over the chasm that separated them. 6 months had passed since William's heart attack. The company headquarters was unrecognizable, not just physically, with its new green spaces and communal areas, but especially in the energy that flowed through the halls. "Mr. Thompson," called Sarah, one of the longest-serving employees, when she saw him passing by. "May I have a moment?" William stopped, smiling. Before, this kind of approach would have been unthinkable. "I wanted to thank you," she said, emotional. "The scholarship program you implemented. My daughter got a spot at college." William felt his eyes fill with tears. Every story like this was confirmation that he was on the right path. The transformation of the company sparked media interest. Journalists wanted to understand how one of the largest technology companies in the country was reinventing its way of doing business. "What caused this change?" asked a reporter during an interview. William paused, thinking about how to explain. "Let's just say I had an experience that made me see the true meaning of success." At home, his relationship with Ethan flourished. Now the boy spent every weekend with his father. Together, they participated in the company's social projects. "Dad," said Ethan during a visit to a school in an underserved community, "when I grow up, I want to continue your work." William hugged his son, feeling a joy that no financial success had ever provided. 10 years had passed since that fateful night in the Upper East Side penthouse. William, now with graying hair at his temples, was sitting in his office, which more resembled a winter garden. "You have a visitor," announced his new assistant. An elderly lady entered, leaning on a cane. It was Mrs. Margaret, his former secretary. "William," she smiled, "I came to say goodbye." "What do you mean, Margaret?" "The doctors have given me a few months," she explained serenely. "But I didn't come here sad. I came to thank you. What you did for me, for the cancer treatment center you created. It changed so many lives." William stood up and embraced his former employee, remembering how insensitive he had been to her in the past. That night, in his penthouse, the same, one where it all began. William gazed out at the city. Ethan, now a 22-year-old young man, was by his side. "What are you thinking about, Dad?" "About how life gives us second chances," replied William, "and about how love is the only thing that truly matters." A gentle breeze swept across the balcony, carrying the scent of jasmine. For a moment, William felt that same loving presence he had encountered during his near-death experience. "You know, son," he said, "sometimes I think we all receive a call to love. The question is whether we choose to answer it or not." Ethan smiled, understanding. The city sparkled below them, and William could see, not with his eyes but with his heart, that same web of light connecting all lives. Now, however, his own connections were no longer weak or broken. They were strong, radiant, full of love. "Was it worth it?" asked Ethan. William looked at his son, at the city, at the life he had built over the past 10 years. He remembered every person he had helped, every life he had touched, every moment of true connection he had experienced. "Every second," he replied, smiling. "Every second."